Welcome in, Braves Today, bravestoday.com. He's Lindsay Crosby. I'm Ben Taylor. I know this is not a face you've seen in quite a while. Neither is that a face you've seen in quite a while, but you've read all of his work on bravestoday.com. It is brought to you none other than Plains Coffee. Go to plainscoffee.com, promo code Braves, get your 10% off. Lindsay, okay, who is Atlanta's MVP? Is it Chris Sale? Is it Marcell Ozuna? I am going with Ozuna just because I owe it to him, because I told him how terrible he was last year.
You did.
For most of the year. And so if I don't go with Ozuna, I feel like I'm just doing him a disservice, because he has completely proven me wrong this year in just about every category, because he leads the team in everything: batting average, home run, RBI, on base percentage, hits. He's the leader in that. That's not counting today's games. So, but I'm still thinking he's probably still there.
No, I haven't counting today's games. He's still there.
Okay.
Yeah, Marcell Ozuna is batting .327 with a .405 on base and a .642 slugging percentage. His OPS is 1,047. His 14 home runs, he's tied, or he's not tied. He is in second place behind Gunnar Henderson of the Orioles and Kyle Tucker of the Astros. His 43 RBIs is first place. And I did a little bit of digging. This is in the takeaways from game 2. A little bit of digging here. Atlanta has 195 RBIs this year. 22% of their RBIs are Marcell Ozuna's. So one out of every 5 RBIs the team gets belongs to Marcell Ozuna, which is absurd if you think about it.
That's ridiculous. That's in it. He said that's in his takeaways. When Lindsay told me that ahead of time, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I thought the guy was important. The fact that he's got 22% of the RBI is absolutely unbelievable. Now, here's the thing that gets me. With that said, where in the world is this team if Ozuna is batting .089? Because that's where he was basically at this point in the year last year. It was May in the Marlins series when he turned it around last year. So where is this team right now if that's the case? And we got another question regarding that as well, amongst another player or two on the Braves roster a little bit later on down the road. But let's just stay with Ozuna. How bad is this team if he's not performing the way he is?
This team's pretty bad if he's not performing. This time, okay, so by May 20th last year, he had started to turn it around. His batting average had gone up to 200 at that point.
Oh, man, he was.
But this is, if you remember, he entered the year of May last year at a .085 batting average. So like that's kind of, it wasn't the low. The low was the 073, but it was not great, right? This is, I genuinely don't think that Atlanta is this close to the Phillies without Marcell Ozuna. And I say that with the caveat of like, this team actually isn't that far back. Like in the standings, for as cold as the offense has been recently, and I wrote all this up, I think the takeaways from the first game about how Atlanta was like bottom 3 in hits over the last 30 days and all of that stuff. You're 5 games back. You're 5 games up in the wild card. Like you are the leader of the National League wild card by 5 games. 27-17 right now. It's the 614 winning percentage is the 3rd best winning percentage in the National League. And you are 5-5 in your last 10. Like it's Philly's done everything they're supposed to do. They're 8-2 right now. Yes, they haven't played a ton of games with a winning record, whatever. The point is they are winning the games they're supposed to win. We really got to stop talking about their record as an excuse. But without Marcell Ozuna, this team's in a rough place. We've seen him walk games off. And even the stats that other players have, we've heard so many stories now of guys who have talked about Marcell Ozuna was the one that got them out of their slump. Michael Harris talked about, like so many guys have said, he took me aside and he talked to me. And from there, everything kind of got fixed and I went on a run. So this team would not be, you're probably a 3rd place team without Marcell, which is hard to think about because the Nationals and Mets are both 21 wins and 25 or 26 losses. But I mean, without Marcell Ozuna, you're significantly worse than you are. But I want to ask you, where do you think this team is without Chris Sale?
Oh man, that's another one where I got to eat my words. This is basically the show of Ben's terrible takes over the last 2 years with Ozuna last year and Chris Sale that I told you as soon as we went out and get him. I said, "Why, Lindsay? Why are we getting this guy?" And he has done nothing but completely made me do a 180 and turn around and come back and be on his side, because now
Mhm.
he, as well as Lopez, are two guys that I genuinely get excited to see take the mound. And I thought that it would be, Fried and Strider my entire time
Yeah.
this year. And with, honestly, a third being Morton. I thought Morton would be a little bit better than what he's been this year. So I will say that, those two guys have really stood out in my mind. And if Sale's not where he is, my gosh, I mean, combination of Sale and Ozuna not doing what they've been doing, it's not
This team's in
last
trouble.
place,
Yeah.
but it's fourth or fifth place easily.
Mm, the
And
Marlins are pretty bad. I've watched a lot of Marlins games.
that's
The
what I'm saying.
Marlins are pretty
It's
bad.
not
Yeah.
last place. It's not last place, but it's going to be fourth or fifth place in my mind easily. There's no. I definitely don't think they're going to be in third on the Nationals. So they'd be behind the Nationals, be behind the Mets. They would. Yeah, you're right. They'd be ahead of the Marlins just because of it's the Marlins,
Yeah.
but it would be God, they'd be the two worst teams to try to watch in baseball if Sale and Ozuna weren't doing what they were doing. It'd be hard to stand a game between the Marlins and Braves. It literally would be the story of the two bad news players playing one another. So I don't
Which is
know.
weird because Atlanta
Yeah,
has such amazing talent on the roster. Can I give you some stats about how good Chris Sale is? Chris Sale has
yeah,
been
yeah. I
recently.
would love.
Okay.
I would love to.
So 7 scoreless
I got
innings.
my guesses, by the way, but I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
I think your stats are actually better than what I was guessing when we were talking beforehand.
Yeah. So 7 scoreless innings on Monday night. So he's now, I believe it's a 20 inning scoreless streak he's on right now. It's the 5th time he's gone 7 innings out of his last 7 starts, right? In his last 6 starts, he's walked 3 guys. And in the month of May, 4 starts in the month of May, Chris Sale has 1 run allowed and 1 walk in the month of May. Like, he has pitched. It's insane. He's pitched like 25 innings and he has 1 walk and 1 run in the month.
And you and I talked about the 1 run. Those of you that don't remember it, Lindsay actually went and looked it up and watched the video to make sure that we were correct in our assumption. At first, I thought it was kind of a single-handed wrister that went over the fence. It was not. It was even worse than that. It was
a 55-mile-an-hour
oh,
fly ball right over Matt Olson's head that scored a runner from third in Seattle in that first game. And then since that happened, he's not allowed a run since that run scored.
And wasn't that on May 1? Yeah, that
was on May
1.
1st. Yeah, that was towards the end of his outing too. He only went 5 innings because he threw like 100 pitches in that game.
Yep.
He just was getting. They were fouling a lot of balls off. It wasn't he got deep into counts. He didn't walk anybody. He did hit a guy, but just get a lot of deep counts. Didn't get past 5, and I believe that was in the 5th inning. And then since then, it's just been literally. I'm not gonna give up any runs. He walked 1 guy like since then, but he struck out like in the month, 25 innings. He struck out 37 batters while walking 1 and allowing 1 run. It's absurd. I'm not gonna go on a limb and say it's like the greatest 4-game stretch in Braves history or any crap like that, but it's insanely impressive, especially for a guy that, if you think about it, you traded a talented but blocked and defensively limited infielder to get, right? Like you Vaughn Grissom would not have had that much of an impact on this roster this year. No. He would have been your option when Ozzy was hurt. He'd have been in AAA the rest of the time. Yep. And instead, you got Chris Sale and he's doing this, and you have him for next year too.
Here's the thing that gets me. And before I get to Lopez, Chris Sale,
Yeah.
he's been as solid as plainscoffee.com, who will not roast their beans until you actually make your order, and then they will ship them right to your door. And they have teas as well as flavored coffees. And trust me, you will not regret going to plainscoffee.com and click on or put the promo code Braves in and get your 10% off. But Sale has been solid. Lopez has been the two guys that were stragglers that we went and grabbed in the offseason because everybody kept on saying, you got to get pitching. You got to go get starters. You got to get starters. Well, he got a starter in Sale, and then AA also got a reliever in Lopez and has made him a starter. And the two have just been phenomenal. As I said, when you ask in the spots that I thought I would be talking about, Strider and Fried. Now, Strider can't help it. I mean, that was an injury, so that's probably why we're not talking about him. Who knows what the potential was there? Fried's still not having a terrible year. It just is not what my expectations probably were.
It started off poorly, right? Like
Yes,
he's significantly improved his stats and everything since then, but it wasn't pretty when it started. And I was thinking about this the other day. I need to go back and look at the exact timing of the Aaron Nola decision versus when we signed Ronaldo Lopez and everything. But if you remember, we were trying, like, it was reported, a lot of the reports came from Philly because you don't hear these things from Atlanta side, but it was reported that we had tried to make a push for Aaron Nola. We were going to go up to like $28 million. The first guy that would have signed outside of Josh Donaldson for more than that $22 million a year.
Correct.
And instead, he took a little bit less money and an extra year to go back to Philly. And so I'm thinking about, like, yes, in the Chris Sale trade, you didn't take on additional salary obligations this season because Boston's paying down his contract, and then you sign him to an extension that changed some of the money around. So,
right.
But if you're able to sign Aaron Nola and you sign him to the size deal that you did, I don't know if you were going to go out and get Chris Sale because of that. And I don't know if you were going to go out and get Ronaldo Lopez because of that. And maybe you were. I'm not saying you weren't going to do that. But can you imagine where this team would be right now if you had Aaron Nola, but you didn't have Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez? Because we just saw today between games, Bryce Elder with an ERA of almost 6 gets sent back down to AAA. Mm-hmm. You called up Darius Vines instead, and I have an idea. I'm probably going to put the story out on Tuesday about how you can use this to build in some extra rest during this long streak. But, like, if you take those two guys out and replace them with just Nola, who's that fifth starter? Because Elder wasn't the guy. And so is Dylan Dodd up here pitching every fifth day? Is Alan Winans? Is Darius Vines? Is AJ Smith-Shawver having to do it at the major league level and you worry about running him out of gas? Like, who is that fifth guy? And just think about, like, Alex Anthopoulos continues to just not get this wrong ever. And it's amazing how it works out for that man every single time, just about.
Well, I told you, number one, because we talked about this a little ahead of time, is I don't think that, number one, we get Sale. Number two, here would be my prediction if that were to take place. And that my prediction would be we would limp along through the first half up into the trade deadline. And then we would have ourselves backed in a corner where we would have to get rid of a bunch of guys to try to get somebody to fill that fifth spot, because I still think we have an opportunity to make a run without Sale if you got Nola, because Nola's proven this year he's doing fine. So he still would have picked up some wins. He hasn't had the May that Sale has had. And
nobody has.
But I will say that, I think you're okay, but by the trade deadline, you would have had to, who knows if there is a Winans left? Who knows if there's an Elder left? Who knows if there's a Dodd left? Who knows? I mean, what do the Braves have to give up in order to make a playoff run this year?
Probably better guys than that. I mean, you're probably having to trade a AJ Smith-Shawver. Teams are asking for an AJ Smith-Shawver. They're asking for a Spencer Swellenbach, for an Owen Murphy. Top prospects. You're not making deals for Vaughn Grissom alone, right?
Right.
Costs are always higher at the trade deadline. You're having to do a lot more and give up a lot more. And it worked out so well. And then Ray Kerr might get a start. Like,
I saw that rumor and I thought I wouldn't mind seeing it just to see what happens.
Well, And kind of to clarify here, Snitker said that they might do that. Like what's not necessarily a rumor, just like somebody made it up. Snitker said they might do that. And the way, I mean, when he came out of college, he was a starter. He spent time both starting and relieving in the minors prior to losing 2020. And when he came back from 2020, he was almost exclusively a reliever. He made one start in all of the previous, like 21, 22, 23, he made one start in the minors. All the rest was relief appearances. Right. And then he made a start with Gwinnett back in like the beginning of May. He started a game. He went 3 innings through like 50 pitches. He went 65 on Monday behind Bryce Elder. It's entirely possible. I could see them doing this. They called up Darius Vines. If Vines is not needed in long relief, I can see Vines being the Wednesday, I believe it's the Thursday starter, which is TBD right now. And then you could roll Kerr out there. You could send Vines back down if you wanted to. You could call somebody else up to make a start. You could piggyback with Kerr. You could just have Kerr start and then go to the bullpen after that, depending on how much you use them. He started in his past. He got to 65 pitches, although he said, I mean, the team said he was gassed that last inning. Like, he didn't have much left. They asked him to go back out for the 7th. But, I mean, that's another one where it was a money deal, right? You went and you got Ray Kerr from the Padres by taking on Matt Carpenter's contract. You cut Matt Carpenter. Ray Kerr was the piece left over from that. And you may have another starter because he's looked like an electric lefty. He's got a 2.89 ERA right now with more strikeouts than innings pitched. I mean, he's barely been up. Wow. It's Alex Anthopoulos, man. Just doesn't miss.
I mean, he's the mad scientist when it comes to this stuff. You mentioned the TBD. Speaking of which, is the Cubs are up next. And, of course, Morton will get the nod on the Tuesday game, followed up by Fried and then the TBD. Expectations of what we plan to see out of the Braves is they took 2 of 3 from the Cubs the first time around and were able to put up 7 runs once in that. Other than that, it was tough to get the bats going against the Cubbies.
If I remember right, they could not figure out Javier Assad. The hope is this is that schedule weirdness I talked about again. You're going to see him again in like a week and a half later. The hope is you can maybe get a little bit more against him this time out. You did not see Justin Steele last time. He was one of the runners up for Cy Young last year. You'll get him on Wednesday against Max Fried. You'll have, so it's righty-righty, Morton versus Assad, lefty-lefty, Fried versus Steele. And then both teams have a TBD on Thursday for getaway day. I don't quite know. Again, don't know what Atlanta's plans are. Don't know what their plans are. We'll probably see based on how the first 2 games go. I'm going to say 2-1. And I think it's because I think Atlanta's going to do better against Assad this time because they've seen him. They've seen his sequences. They've seen what he does. They're more familiar with him. I don't know on the TBD. I'm hesitant to call a win on a TBD. Plus, Dansby Swanson is back. He was activated on Monday. He had a knee injury last time. And there's just something about that dude playing Atlanta. He's going to, he knows Charlie Morton. He knows Max Fried. He's still good friends with Max Fried. He's going to get one of those guys. He's going to get him somehow. He's going to get a big hit. He's going to know what they're going to do. He's going to help them out. And so I'm going to go 2-1.
I'm going to go 2-1 as well. That they're going to take 2 of 3 from the Cubs. And I think a lot of that actually has to do not with anything you just said. I'm big on looking at trends, and with them dropping the series and losing 3 of 4 against the Padres, I just don't see the Braves losing back-to-back series that way. And they tend to do okay in Chicago. I also do like the way Ozzy apparently plays when he's facing Dansby. So when we talk about how good Dansby does against the Braves, apparently Ozzy has a little needle for Dansby as well. So we may see him kind of break out a little bit, and we may see a little more pop in the bat when it comes to Ozzy. So I'm going to go 2 of 3. I think it makes a huge, this is exactly what the Cubs are facing against the Braves, is what the Braves faced time after time last year, where somebody like Winans, for goodness sakes, I think he pitched against the Mets 9 times last year. And so this, with Assad doing that this time around, I agree with you on that. I think that They've got tape to look at. They've got the sequence. You see them always with their heads in the iPads. They're going to make adjustments. You've got Ozuna that just continues to rake, so he's going to be one of your X factors that Assad won't know what to do with. So maybe they'll focus on that. So we'll see. I'll go 2 of 3. Braves taking the series against the Cubs just because they lost 3 or 4 against San Diego, really, and no other reason besides that, and facing Assad for the second time.
On the note of Atlanta losing the last game of the series, if you had to guess real quick, how many, there's been 15, you've played 15 series now.
Yep.
I looked this up for the takeaways. If you had to guess how many of those finales Atlanta has lost of the 15, I'm assuming the last game against the White Sox, the last game against the Mets, I'm calling those the finale, even though those series aren't done because you had rainouts. But of the 15, how many do you think Atlanta has lost?
9.
A lot of people think it's like 9 or 10. They're 8-7 in the final game of a series. It's just, it feels a lot worse because they started off 1-4. You had that long stretch where they just could not win the final game of a series. And the only win was that Diamondback sweep. I looked that up today because somebody said, like, can we finally win the last game of a series? And I'm like, we've been doing better at that, haven't we? We have been doing better at that. But I did also just more fun streak stuff that I found when I was doing that. Atlanta has not lost 5 consecutive games since September 2017. And it's the longest streak in baseball. I just think it's like they actually lost 6 straight back then. And then since then, they lost the 6th game to the Marlins. Since then, they have not lost 5 consecutive games since 2017. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that just goes to show you that they're not playing as bad as we think they are. It's just the fact that the Phillies are playing so good. I don't know if that stat still reigns true because I'm not real sure. I told you I was out of pocket this weekend, so I don't hide that fact. But going into the weekend, I saw the stat where the Phillies had only beaten one team that was over 500 all year, and that was the Braves in the first series of the season. So
at one point they were 1-2. Yeah, late last week they were 1-2 against teams with a record of 500 or better, and that was Atlanta, the one game they won. As of now, so MLB's official standings page actually has record against teams of better than 500. That's one of the fields on there. As of right now, they are 4-2. And I believe it's because somebody else they played has gotten the record above 500 finally.
Okay, well, there you go.
So they are now 4-2 against teams with a record of 500 or better, whereas we are 12-12. We've played 24 games against teams 500 and better. They've played 6. Now, they've won almost all of their games, period. They're 34-14. They've handled their business, which is what you have to do. The big difference to me between the good teams and the fraudulent teams are when you can just beat the teams that you are better than. You win every series against bad teams. They've done that, right?
Yep.
But their schedule is one of the hardest schedules from here through the end of the year, whereas ours is somewhere like middle of the pack or something, or top 10, like 10th easiest or something like that. So they do face harder opponents than us just by luck of the draw. Balanced schedule, you play the same teams the same number of times, but they've got more games against the Dodgers than we do. We've got more against like Washington and Miami than they do. It all balances out.
So again, everybody relax. There's still a lot of season to go. We're not going to lose the pennant right now. Can't win it right now either. However, as Lindsay just said, we got to take care of business against the teams that need to be having business taken care of them against. As it's all brought to you by Plains Coffee. Go to plainscoffee.com, promo code BRAVES, get your 10% off. Takeaways have been up for quite a while now. Lindsay has those, so be sure to go to bravestoday.com. You heard him say more features coming out on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week. You guys will be able to see some of the fun stuff that we do there as well, and then we'll holler at you a little bit later on the week. For Lindsay Crosby. Lindsay, I appreciate it, buddy. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.
You got it.